पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. Thank you, Gaur Kumar Prabhu, for inviting me. It's always a joy to be with you and a wonderful group of intelligent and thoughtful devotees that you have connected with and you are attracting. So I welcome all of you today for joining. Am I audible clearly? I think maybe you have to mute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will speak today on how the Bhagavad-gita's structure complements its message. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm an author, and one of the, you could say, challenges or curses of being an author is that you see everything from the perspective of an author. Now, why did I use the word challenges or curses? Because what happens is the Bhagavad-gita is a book which is a book of profound wisdom. We consider it as a divine revelation. And when each of us, we approach something from a particular perspective. So for example, if we go to a temple, now most of us, when we go to a temple, we will go there to take darshan of the Lord and we'll pray there, we'll offer our respects. But suppose somebody who is an architect, or somebody who is a civil engineer, or somebody who is in the building business, they go there. Now what is going to happen is, they, even if they don't want to, their mind is trained or conditioned, depending on whichever perspective we take, to look at the temple not just as a place of devotion and prayer. They're going to see it as, oh, how is this constructed? And if the construction is done in such a way, if it is done aesthetically, if it is done appealingly, so that the whole impact is when somebody comes into the temple, then the focus becomes more and more on the sanctum sanctorum, on the Lord who is present on the altar. Then what will happen is, they will appreciate the temple even more. That their architectural vision will enhance their devotional appreciation in a way that somebody with a non-architectural vision may not be able to appreciate. However, if the temple is not constructed so expertly, then what happens is the architectural deficiencies or the architectural limitations will distract them from the devotional absorption or appreciation. So in that sense, it can be a curse. If we are specialized in a particular field, then that can aid in our devotion, or that can also impede in our devotion. So I have been reading the Bhagavad-gita for the last 25 years. And as I have been writing more and more, and I have also been rereading the Bhagavad-gita, I found that my vision and appreciation of the Bhagavad-gita have deepened. And I'll try to share some of the reasons for that today. So I'll have a PowerPoint, and we'll also go to the Vedabase if required to look at some verses whenever needed. So let's begin with the Bhagavad Gita's core content, how the Bhagavad Gita structure complements its message. That's the topic we're discussing. Now, what do I mean by the structure of the Gita? Mhm. The Gita is a book. It has 700 verses, which are divided into 18 chapters. Each chapter is of a the chapters are of variable length. Mm. There are two chapters, 15 and 12, which are of 20 verses, the shortest. But all other chapters are of different lengths. So I'm not talking here so much about the number of verses or the division of the chapters, although that is also an interesting study. I'm going to focus primarily on the conversational aspect of the Gita. So, broadly speaking, I will keep this in a format where I can use this as a whiteboard also to write some things. So, I won't make it full screen. So, we can say the Gita's three conversations, if we consider. There is the outer conversation, which is between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay. The Gita begins with Dhritarashtra's words. 1.1 is Dhritarashtra's words. And the Gita ends with Sanjay's words. 18.74 to 78 are Sanjay's words. So interlocutors are people who are having a conversation. So in the outer domain, the Gita's conversation is between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay. And what is the result of this conversation? Dhritarashtra is not transformed. He remains as it is. And we'll elaborate on this. You could say this slide is more or less a summary of what I'm going to speak today. But Sanjay is ecstatic. Rishyami cha muhur muhu, Rishyami cha punha punha. In 1876 and 1877, he says, I'm thrilled. So we'll see why this happens. Then there's the inner conversation, which is usually considered the core conversation of the Gita, that is between Krishna and Arjuna. And this, we'll see where exactly it starts from and where it ends. But what is the result of this? Arjuna is transformed. At the start of the Gita, by the end of the first chapter, Arjuna has put aside his bow. In dejection, in confusion, he says, Visrujya sasharam chapam shoka samvigna manasaha. In 146, he says that it's described that his mind is filled with gloom, with confusion. And that inner confusion manifests as an outer decision. That outer decision is he puts aside his bow, saying, Nayotseti Govindam. He says, I can't fight. So, but from that point, at the end of the Gita, Arjuna's bow has risen. He's ready to fight. Karishe vachanam tava. I will do your will. So this is a transformation in Arjuna. And what about Krishna himself? Krishna's heart overflows with love. So the Gita is not just a conversation between two people. It is actually a conversation that brings two people closer to each other. In general, we see this. We can have transactional conversations. Okay, can you go there and do that? Yeah, I'll do that. No, I can't do that. Those are transactional. Just a certain transaction happens. But there are some conversations which are transformational. Transformational, that means they don't just transform our life in terms of giving us new direction, new vision, new understanding, but they transform even the relationship between the two people who are having conversations. Especially if it's a deep conversation about something which matters to both interlocutors, then it brings the two people closer to each other. So Krishna and Arjuna, they come closer to each other through the conversation of the Gita. And the innermost conversation which the Gita is meant to inspire is the conversation within our own hearts between the Atma and the Paramatma. So the Gita is not just a historical book. It is, of course, a historical book. It's a conversation that happened thousands of years ago on the Kurukshetra battlefield. But at the same time, the Gita is also something which is meant to be alive and active in our hearts. Our body is like a chariot. And we, as the Atma, are present inside this chariot. And then the Paramatma is, in one sense, the controller but he is also the charioteer. He's also the operator. In fact, Krishna himself says this, Ishvara sarvabhutanam Riddeshe Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudhani Maya. Just as it is Krishna who is operating Arjuna's chariot, it is Krishna who is operating our body. Now, this is a big philosophical subject. We may say, I am operating my body. For example, I am speaking right now. So I am speaking. Yes, it is true, I am speaking, but I don't even know how I speak. I just desire to speak. And then my throat muscles, they operate in a very complicated way to produce the precise sound that I want to, that has the meaning which I want to convey. So yes, we may have the intention to act, but the execution happens through mechanisms that we have little understanding of. So it is, the Bhagavad-gita's philosophy explains that between us souls and our physical bodies, the interfacing mechanism is primarily arranged by the super soul. So by the Supreme Lord who is present in our hearts. So in that sense, the Gita's setting is historical as well as universal. It also reflects our being in our bodily chariot. Now, what will be the result of the conversation between the soul and the super soul within our hearts? That is up to us. It's first of all, do we participate in the conversation? That, Krishna and Arjuna were there, but Arjuna never consulted Krishna initially, but eventually he turned to Krishna. So do we turn to the super soul for guidance? Do we take the guidance? Do we apply the guidance? With all that is up to us, and that result will determine our destiny. So the innermost conversation is, in one sense, not a part of the text of the Gita, but it is very much a part of the context of the Gita. That is the intent of the Gita. That is the legacy of the Gita. So with this understanding, now let's move forward to looking a little bit more at the way these conversations proceed. Dhritarashtra speaks in the first chapter to set off the Gita's narrative. And then let's see where Krishna speaks. So Krishna speaks in first chapter once. Uvacha partha pashyaitan samavetan kuruniti. So at this point, Krishna only speaks half a verse. Uvacha Partha. Uvacha, Krishna says, Partha Pashya etan. O Partha, Arjuna, see. Samavetan kuruniti. So we could say over here, at this point, Krishna is basically just doing a functional role. He's a charioteer. At this point. So this is what you have told me to do. Yes, I've done it. You want to see the opposing warriors? Yes, I brought you here. See it now. So we could say in this progression from 1.25 to 2.11, Krishna's role becomes more and more prominent. Then by the second chapter, what happens is Arjuna has seen the opposing armies and he's overwhelmed at the prospect of the fratricidal war that is about to erupt. And it's not just his relatives who are about to be killed. Among those relatives are his venerable elders, specifically Bhishma and Drona. And he just cannot stomach the idea of their death. And what to speak of he being the cause of their death. And thus he says, I can't fight. So at that time, Krishna, so that's the end of the first chapter. And Krishna responds. And we could say here, Krishna's mood is more of a comrade. Yeah, come on, buck up. Don't be fearful. Don't give up to this unmanly weakness. He says that Klaibyam masmagama partha. Klaibyam is his weakness. Don't give in to that. So that's so just like if somebody is a little discouraged, there's a big competition, or a big test is there, and before that somebody is discouraged, you say, come on, this is not the time to be weak. Come on, fight. Let's go ahead, do this. So we could say at this level, Krishna is acting like a friend or a comrade. Hmm? And so, but still, that is a significant elevation from a charioteer. Now, of course, I'm not saying that Krishna is not a friend of Arjuna, is always, but within the Gita's narrative, Krishna's role is rising. Hmm. And then Arjuna retorts, no, I'm not, this is not weakness. This is thoughtfulness. It's not that I am afraid of fighting and dying. It's not that I'm afraid of bloodshed. It's significant that throughout the first chapter of the Gita, when Arjuna is saying that, when Arjuna is reasoning to come to the decision that I will not fight, not once does he express fear of his own death. So sometimes when a newbie soldier is there in a war, in a battle, actual battle, they may just chicken out and say, I can't fight. So Arjuna was not like that. He was a seasoned warrior. He was courageous. So if he was indecisive, it was not because he was afraid of his own death. He was afraid of doing the wrong thing. He was wondering, is killing really worth it? Especially killing my relatives, killing my elders, is it really worth it? Is that the right thing to do? So when Arjuna insisted that actually I'm not weak, I'm confused, and confused about the right thing, then Arjuna asks a question. Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. In 2.7, he asks, I want to know what is dharma. I want to know what is the right thing to do. So that question is universal. And in answering that question, what happens is Krishna starts speaking wisdom. So we could say here, Krishna becomes a counselor. Krishna takes on the role of a teacher, of a guru. Krishnam Vande Jagat Guru. And the first word that Krishna speaks is that Ashochanan Vashochastvam Pragyavadamscha Bhashase Gatasuna Gatasumscha Nanushochanti Panditaha. Is that Arjuna, you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation. Now, this seems to be a very provocative statement, because there are many things which we might say are not worthy of lamentation. So sometimes some people get completely infatuated with some mundane event. Say if somebody's a big sports fan, somebody's a big cricket fan, and their favorite team loses, and they may break down. I was in Canada and I met one person. I was mentioning cricket in my class, and he said that after that he said that he became serious about spiritual life because he and one of his one of his closest friend, they were avid cricket fans. And I think in sometime between 2011 to 2015, this was 2017 when I had gone there. So he said Sri Lanka came in 3 World Cup finals, and all 3 it lost. It was something like T20 and other World Cup, whatever it was. So he says there are a number of Sri Lankan fans who committed suicide because of that. Now it's interesting that none of the Sri Lankan players committed suicide. It is the fans who committed suicide. So now we could say at that time, of course, suicide is tragic. It is no laughing matter. But the point is, he said that sobered me up. There's something wrong with. Yeah. Although I was shocked that my friend committed suicide, I was not shocked also in one sense. Yeah, it was such a terrible thing that we lost. So I said, I felt my values have got skewed. What is really of value I need to understand? And that is when he started exploring spirituality, and he was introduced to the Bhagavad-gita. So we may say, yeah, cricket team losing is not worth lamenting. We can understand that. But here, if somebody's loved ones are dying and they are going to be the cause of their death, how can Krishna say that's not worth lamenting? So in one sense, Krishna begins on a challenging note. He says that it's what you're saying is not worth lamenting. But more importantly, more than challenging, Krishna's message is challenging, but it is also comforting. It is also consoling. Because the point is not just telling him, don't, it's not worth lamenting. He's actually going to explain to him a worldview by which Arjuna will understand how something is not worth lamenting. And Arjuna will become free from lamentation. And it's interesting, this word lamentation. I even before I was introduced to bhakti, I was a well-read person, reasonably. I used to read a lot of books, but I don't remember encountering this word lamentation before I read it for the first time in the Bhagavad-gita. We say that I feel sad, there's grief, there is sorrow, there is pain, there is distress, there is heartbreak. But generally, in common parlance, the word lamentation is not that common in general. So I did a little bit study of this word, the history, its etymology. It's interesting. The word lamentation, what it conveys is something like, don't cry over spilt milk. The implication of lamentation is that something has already happened, something is irreversible, or we could say something is unavoidable, and then we are expending negative emotion on it. That is the specific implication of lamentation. So when Krishna is telling Arjuna, don't lament, ma shuchaha. So the idea is that there are certain things in the world which are unavoidable. And that does not mean that everything is going to go downhill and therefore we are destined to suffer and be miserable. That's not the message of the Gita. If that were the message, yes, things will go down, there will be distresses in our life, and to some extent these are inevitable. But if that was the essential message of the Gita, then Krishna didn't even have to speak the Gita. He could just have said, yeah, this world is a place of lamentation, you are lamenting, okay, message over now. He didn't do that. So it's like you tell somebody, yeah, you have a terminal disease, and the disease is such acute level that no painkiller is going to work. Now go back home, I can't help you. You live in pain and then you die. Oh, I mean, that's such a heartless message, but the doctor may also say, I'm helpless. But that's not the Gita's message. What the Gita does is that the Gita helps us to decouple our consciousness from our circumstances. That is, you could say, in one sentence, the Gita's formula for becoming free from lamentation. What is that? To decouple our consciousness from our circumstances. Now, this decoupling is not because we are irresponsible. It is not because we are apathetic. It is not because we are frustrated. It is not because of any of those reasons. But it is because of a philosophical understanding of how the world works and how we are meant to work in the world. But when we decouple our consciousness, let me put it here. Okay. So how to be free from lamentation? By decoupling our consciousness from our circumstances. To the extent we can do this, to that extent, we will be equipoised. To that extent, we will be able to move ahead in our lives purposefully. This doesn't mean we become, as I said, it become apathetic. It means that there are certain, let it go. Yeah, there are certain things which we can't change. There are certain circumstances which are unavoidable in our lives, and to the extent those circumstances are unavoidable, we accept them and we move forward. So the Gita does this decoupling in many ways, and I'm not going to go into the core message of the Gita right now because we are focusing on the structure. But to quickly summarize, the first decoupling Gita does is by saying that we do not belong to our circumstances, that we are spiritual beings. Our circumstances are material and we are spiritual beings. The second decoupling the Gita does is that it says that actually we are meant to connect not with our circumstances, but it's not. And then third is that work according to the Lord's plan. So this itself could be a whole class, but as I said, I'll not go into that. But to quickly summarize, we are spiritual beings. So that's the first basis of circumstances, that we are meant to connect with the supreme spiritual being. You could say with God. And we act to do God's will in our circumstances. So that way, our focus, even when we are trying to change, we may want to change our circumstances, but our focus is not whether I am successful in changing my circumstances or not, whether I am doing God's will, I am connecting with Him or not, I am developing my relationship with Him, I am deepening my love for Him. That's the Gita's message. So Arjuna, he understands that I am a spiritual being. Similarly, Bhishma, Drona, for whom I care so much, they are also spiritual beings. And I may take care of them. I may say, oh, I won't shoot arrows at them, I won't kill them. And I may think I am taking care of them that way. But actually, far more and far better than whatever care I can offer them, Krishna can offer them much more, because they are eternally connected with Krishna. And right now they are in circumstances where they have to fight against Krishna. So if I do Krishna's will, what is Krishna's will? Krishna's will not just that I fight in this situation. Krishna's will is that I establish dharma. And those who are opposed to the rule of order and virtue in the world, those who will take the world to chaos and misery, if I neutralize them, then by that I will also free Bhishma and Drona to connect with Krishna better. And in this sense, he sees his vision of his role dramatically change. And thus he says that fighting will take him closer to Krishna, fighting will take Bhishma and Drona, about whom is lamenting, closer to Krishna, and fighting will set the world on dharma by which the world can go closer toward Krishna. So that is how Krishna talks about freeing Arjuna from lamentation. But let's not focus on that message right now. We'll focus on the point that Krishna tells Arjuna, you will become free from lamentation. So I talked about three ways in which Krishna's role becomes more and more prominent in the Gita. And this can also happen to us. Initially, what happens for us? Yeah, God exists. Okay. Maybe we may not be atheists, but what happens is that God is, he may not be non-existent, but he is irrelevant. He is inconsequential. When I was introduced to Bhakti, I tried to share it with one of my relatives, and he told me that, I believe in the existence of God. He's happy there and I am happy here. Let's keep the status quo the way it is. So God is irrelevant. But sooner or later, just as Arjuna faced a crisis, the crisis we face may be different. But whatever it is, to do. And then suddenly some obstacles come and our plans just don't seem to be moving forward. And that's when we start turning toward God. Now, initially, many people, especially in today's world, even when they turn towards the Bhagavad-gita, if you search on YouTube, most people, when you search on YouTube for Bhagavad-gita, people talk about how Bhagavad-gita for peace of mind, Bhagavad-gita for motivation, Bhagavad-gita. So the idea is we just want God to act like a comrade. Baka, fight. Go on. So we want God to simply be an encourager for us to do what we want to do. And that is also good. At least we are including God in our worldview. But after that, so that may be the introduction to the Gita for people. But if they go further, then what will happen is the Gita is not just meant to act like a shock absorber for us. Oh, I'm shocked. Somehow the Gita will help you to absorb the shock and move on with life. The Gita is meant to be a goal transformer, not just a shock absorber. So then we understand that God is who I should be connecting with, taking guidance for, not just what to do or how to deal with this problem, but it is for what purpose to live. So one is turning towards God for freeing us from problems, but another is to turn to God for understanding what is the purpose of life and how to fulfill that purpose. So the Gita structure, just as in the Gita, Krishna's role rises more and more. Similarly, in our inner world also, in our, the importance we give to God can also rise when faced with life's perplexities. Then, now let's look at the Gita's 3 endings. Now, the Gita has multiple endings. Here I'm focusing on 3 places where you could say Krishna ends his message. And then I'll talk later about where the Gita actually ends. So the Gita's ending happens at one level in 1863, where Krishna tells Arjuna, Vimrishaitad asheshena yathechasi tatha kuru. Okay, now deliberate on what I have told you and then do as you desire. Deliberate and do as you desire. So that is, we could say at this place, Krishna is more like a dispassionate educator. Sorry, this is not work. Krishna is like a dispassionate educator. Okay, I told you this, now do what you want to do. Sometimes if a doctor is treating a patient, but the doctor is very afraid, is very apprehensive that the patient may sue me because of if some treatment goes wrong. And the doctor may tell very dispassionately again, now if you do surgery for this particular, you have this problem in your thigh, okay, these are the possible complications, this is the cost, and this is the trajectory for your cure if it happens. Now if you don't do the surgery, this is what you will have to do, this is the kind of pain you will suffer, this is the kind of limitation you will have. Now you do what you desire. Now the patient, okay, thank you for telling me these options. The patient, what is your recommendation? He said, no, no recommendation, you decide. Really, how do I decide? I need something more. So actually at this stage, Krishna is focusing on respecting Arjuna's free will. Okay, you do what you desire. And this is actually the mood of the Gita. Nowhere in the Gita does Krishna use his godhood to impose his will on Arjuna. If that's what Krishna wanted to do, then Krishna could have finished the Gita in just 6 words. I am God, obey me, fight. Finished. Krishna doesn't do that. So Krishna is, in one sense, demonstrating also to us how we are to persuade others. We have to appeal to reason and let people take responsibility for the decision. And yet, while this is one ending of the Gita, Krishna doesn't stop here. He moves forward. In 1864, he says, now I'll give you The most confidential knowledge. Sarva guhyatamam bhuya shruno me paramam vachaha. Now I'll give you the most confidential knowledge, the highest of all the words that I have spoken. And then there's Manmana Bhamad Bhakto, 1865. And then there is this Charam Shloka of the Gita, what Ramanujacharya calls the crest jewel verse. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Says, give up all other conceptions of what is the right thing to do and just surrender to me. So this comes with a promise of protection. What is that? Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishami ma shuchaha. Now then, here we say, he just now Krishna was in the mode of a detached or dispassionate educator in 1863. Do as you desire. Then why is Krishna making such an insistent call? Just forget everything, surrender to me. So is there a difference between the two? Yes, there's definitely a difference. Now, is that difference a contradiction? Not exactly. It's a progression, not a contradiction. It's one thing to not impose our will on others. It's one thing to not force others to do what we want them to do. But it's quite another thing that if the other person actually wants guidance, and we say, no, it's your decision. Yeah, I know it's my decision, but if you were in my position, what would you do? No, I can't tell you that. You just do what you want to do. Now, see, we will fail if we are meant to give guidance to someone, if we don't share what we think is the best course of action, then we are also failing in our guidance. So what happens is, at the end of 1863, after Arjuna completes Krishna speaks 1863, Krishna observes that Arjuna is suddenly lost deep in thought. What should I do? Krishna is telling me to deliberate. Well, there are hundreds of verses Krishna has spoken. In which verse should I deliberate on? What is actually Krishna's concluding message? I want to know that. And Krishna and Arjuna are very close to each other. Now, when two people are very close, sometimes even without words, they can communicate with each other. Just through the glance, just through the expression on the face, they can understand each other. So Krishna understands that Arjuna wants to understand what does Krishna want him to do. And therefore, when Krishna is speaking over here in 1864, 65, 66, giving a clear instruction, it is out of love. Because Arjuna wants guidance, so he gives it. So one aspect of love is to respect others' free will. We don't force others to do what we want them to do. But another aspect of love is also, we want to offer the best to them. So based on our intelligence, based on our experience, if we know that a particular course of action will be good for the other person, then telling them that is also an expression of love. So here, because it is Krishna's love is being revealed, so he's like an impassioned lover. He says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishami. That sarva. Now, generally speaking, in writing, it is said that avoid generalizations. Say, for example, never say never. Why? Because what happens is that there can always be exceptions. In one of the early writings that I had done in America, some of you may be aware right now, this the Roe v. Wade case is being re-examined by the Supreme Court about the legality of abortion, or at least the legality of the central government of the court making the abortion a federal issue instead of a state issue. So anyway, I had written an article long ago about how why people want abortion is because they want technology to give them escape way from taking responsibility for their actions. So want irresponsible enjoyment. So one of the senior devotees, only Jayadvait Maharaj, who had reviewed my writing, he said that, is that the only reason? Is it not that sometimes No, there may be sexual abuse, somebody might be raped. So he says, whenever you use the word never, be very careful. Because now, of course, I'm not going to the ethics of abortion over here. But my point is that if somebody is using the word never or always, these 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 words which have no qualification in one sense, then it has to be very, very emphatic. And Krishna uses these non-qualified words twice. Sarva dharman parityajya sarva. And he also uses sarva papebhyo mokshayishami. So sarva he uses twice. So give up all your conceptions of what is the right thing to do. And I will free you from all sinful reactions. So generally speaking, this is a very, very categorical assurance. No, nobody will give this kind of assurance. Say if we are traveling, then we may take some travel insurance. But during travel insurance, there will always be conditions apply. In this case, the insurance will apply. But Krishna is giving an insurance that will apply at all times. Sarva papebhyo mokshayishami. So what is happening over here is Krishna's heart overflowing with love is coming out over here. And that's why this is a very it's a very inspiring verse. It's, you could say, it's an inspirational ending of the Gita. And then the third ending is actually the textual ending. The textual ending is where actually Krishna's words stop. And he says, Kachideta Shrutam Partha Tvayekagrena Chetasa Kachidajnana Sammoha Pranashtaste Dhananjaya. So he asks two questions. He asks, have you heard attentively? And have you understood clearly? Has your illusion been dispelled? Now, why does he ask this? He asks this because Krishna is not just concerned about delivering a discourse. Like sometimes there are paid speakers who come, they just give a speech and then they will get their payment, they go away. Krishna is actually concerned whether Arjuna has understood clearly or not. And the implication is, if Arjuna something you were not able to hear attentively. Now, why this hear attentively is mentioned? Because they are on a battlefield. Although everyone else is silent at that time when they are discussing, because Bhishma, when he sees that these two are having a conversation, Bhishma says, okay, stop, no attacking, no noise over here, let them speak. So, but still, although the outer world might be peaceful, but Arjuna's inner world was turbulent. Arjuna was extremely agitated. He couldn't even hold his bow. Gandivam sramsate hastad, he says. So Arjuna was overwhelmed. So Krishna, when he's asking, have you heard attentively, means, what did the inner noise disturb you in your hearing? And then have you understood clearly? So Krishna is actually very clearly expressing his awareness of Arjuna's condition and his willingness to work with Arjuna in his condition. It is not saying that, oh, you should not be disturbed, I'm speaking such an important message, you should be paying attention. Now, if you are not able to pay attention, then I will repeat whatever is required. So this reveals Krishna to be a concerned mentor, a dedicated mentor who wants to make sure that a student understands. And thus, these three endings of the Gita, what do? They reveal, again, different facets of Krishna's personality. So one is, okay, I'm an educator, I've done my part. Generally speaking, if we want to persuade someone, if you want to get someone to do something, it's one thing we have to appeal to their head, appeal to their intelligence, but it's also we want to appeal to their heart. So in one sense, Krishna appeals to the head and the heart both. He appeals to the head by giving the analytical message with an analytic ending. He appeals to the heart by making a personal call. And then at the end of it, he further inquires, have you understood clearly or not? So this is how Krishna's rich personality, Krishna's loving and lovable nature is revealed at the end of the Gita. I'll conclude with one last point, that it's interesting that after this, Arjuna says, yes, I have my illusion is dispelled and I will do your will. So Sarvadharman Parityajya, surrender. Krishna tells Arjuna surrender. Arjuna says, yes, I will surrender. But the Gita doesn't end at this point. What happens after that is there are 5 verses spoken by Sanjay. The Gita is ending in either Krishna's words, which is at 1872, or Arjuna's words at 1873. It is actually 5 more verses. So why are they necessary? Because they demonstrate the teaching of the Gita. In one sense, what are these 5 verses containing? These 5 verses express Sanjay's heart. So 1874, he says, I'm so grateful that Samvadamim Adbhutam Ashrausham. I got an opportunity to hear this extraordinary conversation. And then how was I able to hear this? Vyasa Prasada Shrutwan. So he expresses his gratitude towards his guru, by whose arrangement he was able to hear this message. And then he says, I am remembering the message of Krishna and I am feeling ecstatic by that. Rishyami cha muhur muhur. And then he says, I'm not just remembering the message of Krishna. In the message of Krishna, the centerpiece, the conclusion, the purpose is Krishna the person. Krishna the all-attractive person who also manifested as magnificent universal form. So he says, I am remembering that. And that is also making me ecstatic. So both the message and the person giving the message, both of them I'm remembering and I'm becoming ecstatic by that. And the last says there's a prophecy of the Pandavas' victory. So why does the Gita end in this way? At one level, these words, what are they are indicating that there are different results of the Gitas. So as I mentioned, I talked about the inner and outer conversation. There is Krishna spoke the Gita to enlighten Arjuna, and that mission was successful. Now Sanjay spoke the same message to Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra remained attached. He was not transformed. So he didn't immediately, oh, Krishna is God. Krishna is so loving. Why should my son be fighting against him? Even if he wants to fight, I will not let him fight. It was not that Dhritarashtra immediately sent messengers. Tell Duryodhana not to fight. No, he didn't do anything. He just continued hearing. So what happened is that he was not transformed. So we could say Sanjay was unsuccessful. Yes, Sanjay was unsuccessful. But though he was, so in one sense, the outer success was not there, but the inner success was there. What is the inner success? That in speaking the Gita, Sanjay learned more about Krishna and became attached to Krishna. We all want to achieve many things in the world. And yes, we have energy, we have ability, and we are meant to make a contribution in the world. We are meant to make a difference in the world. At the same time, whether our endeavors will lead to the desired results or not is not in our control. But if we act using our God-given ability in a mood of service to God, then through our endeavors, we will go closer to God. We will become attached to Him. And that attachment to Him, that attraction to Him, that love for Him, that is an eternal gain. Whatever we may achieve in the world, we may achieve wealth, we may achieve fame, we may achieve, we may say, okay, I'm not just wealth and fame, I made a positive difference in the world for all these people. Yes, but even all that is temporary. What is enduring is our inner connection with the Lord. So the Gita, for example, talks about detachment. Karmanne vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't be attached to the fruits of your work. And through Sanjay's example, the Gita demonstrates that Sanjay himself is not attached to the fruits of his work. And thus, this is why I talk about how the Gita structure complements its message. That what it has taught, it has shown, it has demonstrated. And detachment is not due to frustration, it is not due to helplessness. It is not that, suppose we lose something and I say I'm detached from it. No, that's not the kind of thing which is we talking about here. Voluntarily giving up the. Okay, I'll skip this part here. Let's focus on this last part now. So in the last verse, Arjuna say, Sanjay says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Partho Dhanurdara Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Dhruvani Tirmatir Mama. So he said, now Yatra. So he could have just straightforward said that uh, actually, who's going to be successful? Let's go back to this. The Gita's symmetry is there. So we can say that I said the inner conversation, the outer conversation. The inner conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. So the question was, what is dharma? And what is the right thing to do? So Krishna tells Arjuna that. So that the right thing to do is just do my will. That is the right thing to do ultimately. All the codes of dharma that we may have obey our parents, be faithful to their country, or help the child, help the needy, or whatever it is. We have all those, be clean. Ultimately, they are subordinate to the principle. We are meant to do God's will. So that is the right thing to do. And the question which Dhritarashtra asked Sanjay was, what happened at Kurukshetra? Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. What did they do? And now the implied question was, what will happen on the battlefield? What will happen when the war goes forward? What will happen to my sons? So there is an indirect question. Say, for example, if there's a cricket match going on, and then somebody asks, oh, what happened in the cricket match? Now, they may ask what has happened in the cricket match, but if they are very passionate about one particular team or one particular player, then the question is, okay, is my team winning? Is my favorite batsman batting well? That's the question. So like that, Dhritarashtra's implied question was, what will happen to my sons? And in the same mode that Dhritarashtra asks a question indirectly, Sanjay also answers that question indirectly. He says, he doesn't say your sons are doomed. He says, where there is Krishna and where there's Arjuna, there will be victory. Now, why does he say that? He could even have said the Pandavas will be victorious. He could have said that. Even if he didn't want to say that the Kauravas are going to be defeated or Kauravas are doomed, he could have said Pandavas are going to be victorious. But he didn't say that. He said, wherever there is Krishna and where there is Arjuna, there is victory. So why this? Because here the yatra can be both geographical and universal. So Sanjay is giving both a specific and a universal conclusion. What does that mean? That means at one level in the Kurukshetra war, it is Arjuna and Krishna. Sorry, what happened? It is Arjuna and Krishna who are going to be successful. Their side is going to be successful. But if we go back to the innermost conversation of the Gita, which is between the soul and the super soul, that where the soul chooses to be in harmony with the super soul, where God and the divine and the human will become one, there will be victory. That is the universal message of the Gita. Now we could say that, isn't it that wherever there is God, there will be victory? So because God is all powerful, God where there is Narayan, there will be Lakshmi. So why does Arjuna have to be mentioned over there? Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishna Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir. Why Arjuna has to be mentioned? Because the point of the Gita is not just to declare God's position, or where there is God, there will be victory. The point of the Gita is to change human disposition. That wherever there is God, there will be victory. Therefore, align with God's will. That is the purpose of the Gita. And that's the implication of the concluding verse. That where there is Krishna and Arjuna, there will be victory. That means where the soul chooses to align with the super soul, where we start becoming instruments for God's will, there we will be successful. So that is the conclusion of the Gita. And that is something which is universally applicable for everyone. So I'll summarize what I spoke today. I spoke about how the Gita's structure complements its message. And I started by talking about how, as an author, as if an architect sees a temple, then they will see it from the architectural perspective, like author. So I tried to look at the Gita from the structural perspective, and beautifully structure complements the message. So in terms of structure, I discussed the Gita has three conversations: the outer between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay, inner between Krishna and Arjuna, and the innermost between the soul and the super soul. And the in the Gita, Krishna speaks, we could say Krishna's speech begins at three places: 125, where he's speaking, where he's more like a charioteer doing Arjuna's will, and 223, where he's more being like a comrade, and then 211, where he starts taking on the role of a counselor. So Krishna's role becomes more prominent. And similarly, in our lives, when our plans are thwarted by the world's perplexities, then we may turn towards God more, and God's role may become more prominent in our lives. And when Krishna says this is not worth lamenting, what you are lamenting about, the point is he is giving Arjuna a vision. The Gita's essential message, we could say, is that we can and should decouple our consciousness from our circumstances. And how do we do that? There are three things. We don't belong to our circumstances. We are spiritual beings. And our purpose is to connect with the supreme spiritual being, not control our circumstances. Then are we not to do anything about our circumstances? No, we act in a mood of service to the supreme to do what we can to make our circumstances better. But our purpose is not to change the circumstances or control them. Our purpose is to connect with the Lord and do his will. And then if Arjuna does Krishna's will, then Krishna is a greater benefactor of everyone, including Bhishma and Drona, about whom Arjuna is concerned. So that message, how does it illustrated towards the end? That we say we are meant to connect with Krishna. What's so special about Krishna that we should connect with? That speciality of Krishna is illustrated in the Gita's conclusion. So the three places where we could say Krishna's message ends: 1863, which reveals him as a dispassionate educator. Okay, I have given you choices, now you do what you desire. So here Krishna is loving, but his love is seen by how he respects Arjuna's will. But then because Arjuna sincerely wants clearer guidance, Krishna shows another aspect of his love. It is not just to respect others' free will, but it's also to want the best for those whom we love and offer them the best. So therefore Krishna says categorically, I discuss no qualification, sarva dharman parityajya sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. It's a very emphatic categorical guidance. So here this reveals Krishna to be an impassioned lover. And then last 1873 is Krishna is a dedicated mentor. Have you heard attentively? Did all the disturbances in your mind distract you? If they did, I am ready to repeat whatever needs to be spoken again. So such is the loving Lord revealed in the Gita's conclusion. And then after that, Gita doesn't end over there. Arjuna says, yes, I will surrender to you. But then Sanjay's words reveal the Gita in action. That sometimes, despite our best efforts, we may not succeed. So Krishna's words transform Arjuna, but Sanjay's words don't transform Dhritarashtra. But Sanjay's words, speaking the Gita, transform Sanjay. He becomes absorbed ecstatically in Krishna's message and Krishna's form. And that connection with the Lord is the lasting gain which we all can have. And the symmetry of the Gita is that Arjuna's question 2.7, what is the right thing to do, is answered in 1866, do God's will. And one point when Dhritarashtra's question, what happened to my sons, that's answered in 1878, that they are doomed. But in answering that indirectly, the way Dhritarashtra asked the question, Sanjay also gives a universal message that wherever the soul and the super soul align together, there will surely be victory. So that is the universal message of the Gita. And I sometimes put this message as, be not apart, be a part. So be not apart from God, be a part of God. Learn to align with Him. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. There's so many brilliant, wonderful points. It was sweet, it was subtle, it had structure, it had symmetry, it had a wonderful summary of the Gita. So thank you so much, Prabhu, for taking the time and being with us. And we can see some people are clapping. And so I won't take too much time. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask the question. Thank you. Yes, Lekha Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. We feel very
Hare
fortunate to
Krishna.
hear from you every single time. Prabhu, I had one question regarding. So, in the starting, you had said something in the lines of when Jivatma and God speaks, the output is a beautiful transformation. Is that the same as surrendering? If not, what do you? I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. Like, how do we speak?
Yes, the connection between us and the Lord, Atma and the Paramatma, it is a progressive connection. The surrender is, of course, depending on what we mean by surrender, it can be the culmination or it can even be the beginning. If you see in the Gita, that words similar to surrender come thrice. It comes right in the beginning where Arjuna says, I'm surrendering to you in 2.7. It says, Karpanya dosho pahata soba pruchhami tvam dharma sammooda cheta yashrehasam nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shadhi mam tvam prapannam. Prapannam is surrender. So surrender is the beginning of our relationship with the Lord. So there, that surrender is not that I'll do your will, but I will hear from you. Okay, I've been hearing from so many other sources, so many telling me do this, do this, do this. No, I want to hear you. So this is, we turn to God for guidance. It's not necessarily we are going to apply it at that time.
Yeah.
But at least, so that is also one level. Okay, so at this time, each of you could have maybe done your work, watched TV, read news, surf social media, but you chose to hear the Gita. So that itself is one level of surrender. Then another place where the theme of surrender comes in the Gita after 2.7 is 7.14, where Krishna gives the process that Daiviya Esha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. So then we understand that actually, okay, I may be facing a particular perplexity right now, but perplexity, temptation, and all these are just a way of the world. And if I want to go beyond this, then surrender is the way. Now, what does surrender mean over here? Surrender basically means we connect with the Lord rather than obsessing over how to deal with the world. We have to deal with the world, but focus first on connecting with the Lord. So, for example, we begin our day with our devotional practices and we pray to the Lord, we chant the holy names, we immerse ourselves in spiritual wisdom, and then we face everyday's challenges, whatever challenges we have to face. So in one sense, 2.7 surrender is the seeking of guidance. And then 7.14 surrender is the process for liberation. And then 1866, when there is surrender, it is a call from the Lord. This is what you need to do to overcome whatever problems we may face. So for us as souls, whatever situation we are in, even if we turn a little toward the Lord, surrender doesn't mean that we just radically change our family situation, professional situation, something like that. Okay, in my situation, what can I do to link with the Lord first? So it could be just we are facing some critical situation in our life. Before trying to deal with that, maybe just take a few deep breaths, pray to the Lord, and then take a few steps forward. If it's a major decision, then maybe consult somebody who is consult a spiritual guide, a spiritual mentor. So it's a surrender can come in many, in terms of forms. There can be many practical ways in which surrender can come in. But the essence of surrender is we try to connect with the Lord and then act. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhu. Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
You have time for a couple more questions, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, surely.
Vinay Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavata Pranams.
Hare Krishna,
Amazing
Vinay.
class, like amazing title and fully amazing class. I mean, it gave us content to think about Gita and introspect about it and connect dots. So it really helps, this class really helps to contemplate about Gita and then think about it practically. So thank you so much, Prabhu. So I have like two questions. First question is about Dhritarashtra, where like so you said that Dhritarashtra was not affected at the end of Bhagavad Gita, but in Bhagavatam there comes this verse in like in I think 1.10.9 and 10th verse where it's mentioned that when Lord Krishna was leaving, there was Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, all the Pandavas, and they all were like crying and they were not able to bear separation from Krishna. That's what that verse says. So like I mean, was the Bhagavad Gita had some subtle impact on Dhritarashtra or he transformed later? Yeah, so this is my first question, Prabhu. And the
Okay.
second question is
Okay,
about
let me complete this question first and
okay.
address this. Okay, so now that's an interesting observation that it mentioned there that uh, even everybody was lamenting when Krishna was departing. So, in my understanding, that there is to some level uh, uh, there is a possibility that there can be attraction toward the Lord because of the force of the circumstances. In the Sandarbhas, Jiva Goswami explains that sometimes a devotee who may be a very new sadhaka, that devotee may also experience advanced devotional emotions because of either the association of advanced devotees or because of a very devotionally surcharged atmosphere. See, sometimes even ordinary people, when they go to a temple, they feel, oh, there are some special vibes here. What is this? I don't know where those vibes are coming from. They may not even acknowledge that those are coming from the deities, but they say this place has some vibes. So similarly, at that time, the Pandavas were, because they were so intensely devoted to the Lord, and the followers of the Pandavas were also quite devoted to the Lord. So there was a very intense devotional atmosphere that was created, and it was that which led to uh, having some kind of spillover effect that had an effect on Dhritarashtra also, and because of that he was also lamenting that Krishna was departing. There is no incident, as far as I can remember, in the Mahabharata where Dhritarashtra was ever averse to Krishna. It was just that he was too attached to Duryodhan, and that's why he didn't, or he couldn't, we could say, take Krishna's guidance. And we do see after that also, after that incident also, he continues on his attached ways. It is only when eventually Vidura comes and chides him, chastises him very strongly, that he becomes enlightened. So that was that at one level, because Dhritarashtra was never directly offensive to Krishna. So Dhritarashtra, we could say that he didn't stop when Draupadi was being dishonored. So isn't that offense? Well, yes, at one level, yes. But it was not he was directly doing it. And he was never averse to Krishna. When Krishna was revealing the universal form, he asked Krishna, I want to see it. That was in Duryodhana's assembly. So because he was not averse to Krishna, and because he was in an intense devotional atmosphere, when the Pandavas feeling separation from Krishna, so that had an effect on him also. And similarly with Gandhari. Okay.
Amazing, Prabhu. Yeah, thank you so much. And so I had one second question also, Prabhuji.
Yes,
So
please.
this
Yeah.
is about the recent incident that happened in Texas, Uvalde town, like a 19-year-old boy. He just he took a gun, he killed his grandmother, then he went to elementary school, killed the like 19 kids, 3 adults, whoever was in the class. So I mean, Prabhu, what are your thoughts? So that I read some articles where like government is trying to figure out what they can do about this, ban gun, do not ban guns, or it's more of a mental health issue that is uh, among these kids. So I mean, how we can see this, and like how we can think about this as a devotee as well, and as well like, or as a normal person, in both the ways. What are your thoughts on this, Prabhu?
Yeah. Yeah, the Texas incident where so almost 19 kids were killed by a person who just went mad and had a gun with him. This is tragic, and heart goes out to those who have been afflicted by it. And now, one of the challenges is that we humans, when something terrible happens, we we look for a villain to blame the situation on. So now, are guns the problem? Is mental health the problem? Life is complex. That it's not easy to find out uh, you- to pin a complex event on a particular issue alone. Yes, we can say, okay, if guns were not so easily available, then this person wouldn't have done so much. Well, yes, that is true at one level. But at the same time, mm, could say that if somebody goes mad, there were some terrorists who just drove a truck into a crowded marketplace and they killed people. Now we say this is not a terrorist, this is a mentally disturbed person. Yes, that is true. So the point is that just blaming guns, is that the solution? No. Is blaming mental health the solution? Well, it's not a solution. People are mentally disturbed and they need help. So what has happened in today's world is that uh, in general, we humans have got far more power than what we can handle safely. Now that is almost everywhere, that technology has given us access to a lot of power. Now, it's not just one form of technology. People nowadays would say, is to take a different example, is we consider social media like Twitter. Now, one person can tweet something which may be a malicious lie about somebody else, but that can destroy the other person's reputation. The other person may defend and refute and everything, but maybe the whole world may hear the lie and very few people will hear the refutation. So that is the predicament of the world we live in, that we have got access to far more power. So we have access to a lot of outer power, and in many ways we can say we have lost access to inner power, the power to manage our own emotions, the power to manage our own mind, that we have lost substantially. So now when we say mental health problems, it could be a pathological thing where some medication is required. But again, mental health problems are not simply biological problems that a medicine alone will solve the problem. Medicine may help to deal with the problem at that particular point, but there are overall sociological, spiritual issues. Ultimately, mental health comes when people have something meaningful to live for. Otherwise, there are different degrees at which mental health problems start worsening. So there is no one quick solution for this. In general, the Bhagavad-gita talks about when it talks about dealing with the problems of the world, it talks about dharma at the social level, and it talks about bhakti at the individual level, or you can say yoga, which culminates in bhakti at the individual level. That definitely dharma means the word dharma. When Krishna said dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, what does he mean by that? There, I have come to establish dharma means I am establishing order in the world. I have come to establish order in the world. So the idea is that there has to be order established in the world more effectively. Now, whether that establishing of order means that guns should be banned, or there should be greater checks on who can acquire a gun, or there should be greater security so that somebody with gun cannot come into places where they can endanger the lives of others. That is something which is context specific. That we have to carefully consider the situation, and but the principle is dharma, order, law and order needs to be established more effectively. But that is only one part of the solution. Ultimately, every human heart longs for meaning, purpose, and ultimately love. So the Gita's 4.8 is about establishing dharma in the world. 4.9 and 10 are about establishing prema, bhakti in the heart. So now when we say bhakti is not just a particular tradition's way of connecting with God in a particular conception, but it is helping the human heart find some higher meaning, some higher fulfillment, some higher love. So that is something which has to be done. That is not something which the government alone can do. That is the individual's responsibility, that is society's responsibility, and that is what we can contribute some steps towards. Wherever we are trying to raise our consciousness, wherever we are trying to offer others resources for raising their consciousness, to that extent, that disconnection of the human heart with the divine, at least to some extent, that will decrease. And in that way, problems like these tragedies, they can be minimized. Henry David Thoreau said that for every one hacking at the shoot of a tree, 1,000 such hackings, better than 1,000 hackings at the shoot of a tree, is one hacking at the root of a tree. So the root of the tree is that, to the extent we don't have a meaningful life, the mind will make us do more and more meaningless things. And some meaningless things will be relatively harmless. Okay, somebody just spends a lot of time just mindlessly surfing the net. Some people just drink and maybe drive and harm someone. Some people actually take a gun and go outright and shoot someone. So there are degrees uh, of meaningless things which can be worse and worse. But ultimately, we need to have meaning in life. So that hacking at the, so we can look at, oh, this person did something terrible and that person did something terrible, and we try to fix that. It's important at a practical level to do that, but that's like hacking at the shoot of the tree. Sometimes that's also required circumstantially, but hacking at the root of the tree means we need to help individuals, more and more individuals, find meaning and purpose in their lives. And that is what the Bhagavad-gita's wisdom can offer everyone. And when that is done, and the root of the tree of evil is hacked, then such meaningless violence will definitely decrease. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just one last question, Kiran. Kiran, please go ahead.
I think Guru raised my hand before me. Is it okay if I go first, Guru?
Sure, Prabhu. Please. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Prabhu, thanks very much for this wonderful class, and thanks so much for spending so much time with us. There was a point in your slides when you were mentioning getting free from lamentation by decoupling a consciousness from circumstances. And then you said that 3 steps, which are we are spiritual, meant to connect with God, and act to do God's will. My question is, I think there is a very essential connection between lamentation and regret. And I personally believe that although we should not be lamenting about things in the material world, we should nevertheless be regretful of some things, because we're all living entities and we have to learn by our own mistakes. And if we just believe that, oh, this is just God's plan, so be it, we will never learn from our mistakes. So what is the difference between regret and lamentation, and how can we make sure that the regret is not going towards the lamentation? Yes,
Yeah,
Prabhu.
very good question. The difference between lamenting and regretting is the focus of our consciousness. That means when we are lamenting, it is more about what has happened. Oh, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why does this person do like this? Or why I had this opportunity, but then the opportunity went away because because maybe the interview was cancelled, or this didn't happen, that didn't happen. So basically, in our functioning in the world, there are some things in our control and there are many things not in our control. So when our negative emotions are focused or even fixated, we can say, on the things that are not in our control and why they work out in an unfavorable way, that is what we call as lamentation. Don't so say for example, don't cry over spilt milk. The milk is already spilt. We can't do much about it. Now we can say it is I who spilled the milk. Okay, we need to learn from it. So, but oh, the milk is spilled, the milk is spilled, milk is spilled. Okay, it's already spilled now. Okay, now why did I spill it? Maybe I was inattentive. Maybe I didn't. Maybe my hands were wet. Maybe I filled the pot too much, or whatever reason. That we need to learn. So when we talk about regret, it is more focused on what was in our control, which we could have done better, but we didn't do. So that is definitely taking responsibility. So we all need to take responsibility for our actions and then try to improve our actions in the future. So if we don't regret some of the wrongs that we have done, then how will we improve? So regretting is helpful for us to improve, but lamenting takes our energy from what we can do now to what didn't happen right for us. Now, of course, so in that sense, lamenting is undesirable. Now, of course, with respect to regret also, we have to be careful that we, at one level, take responsibility, but at another level, we also distance ourselves. Yeah, that was the past me that did it, but I have to take responsibility for it. I try to do something to, if I can, to fix the situation. But beyond that, I shouldn't just keep beating myself up. I'm such a terrible person that I did it. So there's a difference between I did a terrible thing and I am a terrible being. So I did a terrible thing is taking responsibility. That is regret. That is associated with regret. But I am a terrible being, that is associated with unhealthy guilt, toxic guilt. And that is quite damaging. That is also to be avoided. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Guru Prasad, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. And
Hare
thank you very
Krishna.
much, Vinay Prabhu, also for sharing the link. I'm very grateful to be part of this August audience. So Prabhu, I just had a question. Actually, my question was with respect to, say, for instance, when we're speaking to friends and like trying to share the Gita's message up to whatever we've understood, there are certain things sometimes sometimes people share certain deep realizations with us, and we feel like, for instance, or they've read certain things, and based on what I've heard, I feel like, maybe that's not the way we should be interpreting certain texts. And I want to jump up at them and say, no, that's not the way you should potentially do it. And this kind of reminds me as what you had mentioned about what Krishna does. So Krishna is also, while he's just smiling and he's not saying anything until actually Arjuna really surrenders unto Krishna, and then Krishna opens his mouth and it starts kind of speaking the whole Gita. So I'm wondering, how do I curb my tendency to try to jump at them, or potentially I try my best, but then sometimes it doesn't come out of practice. What should I be doing about this?
So just as Krishna doesn't speak unless Arjuna turns towards him. So how do we curb our tendency to advise others? Yeah, there are 2-3 different things over here. First is that, why do we want to give advice? Second is who we are giving advice. And third is that when are we giving advice? When or how? So basically, the subject, the object, and the context, the circumstance, the overall mood, the interaction. That's how relationships work. There are 3 things in it: the interaction, and the 2 people involved. So sometimes we may want to give instruction or we want to give advice because we want to put ourselves in a superior position. Yes, we want to show others how much I know, and people can catch that soon. that we are putting on a superior errors. And what happens at that time, even if what we're telling is right and good, still they will turn off from that, because they'll just not like the way we are speaking. And that can be a problem. So we can try to pray that, I'm yes, I have some knowledge, and based on that I'm sharing it, but my purpose is not just to show how much knowledge I have. My purpose is actually to help the other person. So we can prayerfully try to cultivate a mood of helpfulness. That's all we can do from our perspective. The second is that with respect to the other person, the nature of the mind is that it often makes us believe that the wrong, not only makes us do the wrong things, but even when those wrong things are shown to be wrong, the mind makes us put the blame somewhere else. That means that it's not easy for people to acknowledge the need for guidance, and especially guidance which will make them do something which is different from what they're doing right now. So that's why it's sometimes more important to let them recognize that they may be on the wrong track. Now we can always give some hints in terms of that. Maybe we have some insight that we could share, or we could indirectly tell that we are available to help. But generally speaking, advice that is given unsolicited is not valued much. So it just puts people off. And that's not just others' tendency. We'll observe that is our tendency also. That now this is not always true, because there are some areas where we may be aware that I am not so good, I need to improve. And there are people who are, say, for example, they go and pay a coach to improve certain things. That is where they're conscious that they are deficient. But especially in areas where people are not conscious, then rather than thinking that, oh, I have to help, maybe find out in our social circles or wherever we are, there may be somebody who will value our help, and then focus on helping them. In general, in our relationships, I should put it that we needn't overvalue the people who devalue us. We don't need to overvalue the people who devalue us. That means, if I'm giving some good advice, this person is not taking it. Why is he not taking it? Well, if he's not taking, that's their life. Just forget it. Don't overvalue their neglect of us. But learn to value those who value us. We'll find in our social circles, there are some people who actually, we spend time with them, we talk with them, they value the input. But somehow, because they value it so much, we tend to devalue them. But this person is always there only. So that the irony is that those who value us, we devalue them. And those who devalue us, we overvalue them. So don't overvalue or devalue those who devalue us, and learn to value those who value us. So that way, if we have something to share, they will benefit from it. And a third is the context. Context means it's where do we share? Is it in public where they will feel shamed by it, or they'll feel embarrassed by it? Or is it in private, discreetly? What tone we share it in? And what is their frame of mind when we are sharing? That has to be considered. This going back to the earlier example of Vidura and Dhritarashtra. Now, Vidura tried to give good advice to Dhritarashtra, and many times Dhritarashtra would solicit that advice and then neglect it. He would ask, what should I do? And he'll say, no, this I can't do. So, but what happened is, eventually life brought Dhritarashtra to a situation where all his other hopes were shattered. It was his attachment to Dhritarashtra that was what actually blinded him. But when it was attachment to Duryodhan rather. When Duryodhan was killed, then when Vidura gave advice, at that time Dhritarashtra could take it. So sometimes it's a matter of timing also. So we just have to be patient till the right time comes. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all these thoughtful questions. Thank you, Gaur Kumar Prabhu, for inviting and insisting. I had another engagement today which you insisted I should cancel. So I'm grateful for that. So thank you everyone for your thoughtful questions. And let's pray that the Gita continue to be our guiding light in our lives. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai.
Great Chaitanya Charan
Gaur
Prabhu
Premanand.
ki jai.
Jai.
I just have a
Jai.
couple of
Thank you
quick
very much.
announcements.
Yay.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
I just
Thank
have
you
a
very
couple of
much.
quick announcements for those of you who want to stay just a couple of minutes. So first thing is, if you would like, so whatever Chaitanya Charan Prabhu spoke today, it's from, it's going to be from two of his books that are upcoming. One is called Relishing the Gita, and the other one is called Gita Insights. So both of them will be available soon, right, Prabhu? So how will everyone be able to get the books?
Yeah. So most of the points I spoke are from these two books which I just completed, Relishing Gita and the Gita Bhagavad Gita Insights. These Relishing the Bhagavad Gita approaches the Gita more from the perspective of relationship of Krishna and Arjuna, from the heart's perspective. So how Krishna and Arjuna's relationship is revealed and developed through the conversation of the Gita. That's the focus. And Bhagavad Gita Insights is talking about how system, when we read the Gita, when any average person will read the Bhagavad Gita, what are the standard questions that may come? And not all the questions, but several of them I try to address over there. So each of these has 100 articles, and there are almost 80 illustrations to go with the articles also. So both these books will be available on Amazon, both as Kindle books as well as print on demand orders by this weekend. And maybe Gaur Kumar Prabhu can send the links to you once they are available. Okay.
So thank you so much.
Thank you
Prabhu.
for reminding me about that, Gaur Kumar.
And these two are amazing books. I had the good fortune of going through both of them, and I strongly recommend that you please pre-order them and purchase them. You'll definitely benefit. The second announcement is His Grace Shamanand Prabhu will be here with us next Wednesday. He's been a regular speaker in our group, and we are really fortunate that he'll be joining us next week. And also for those of you who know, Radhesham Prabhu is in town, and he very gracefully accepted our invitation, and he'll be speaking to this NYU students and students in general in this New York, New Jersey area. So if you are available, we'll be doing this program at the Bhakti Center in the 5th floor on Friday at 6:30 p.m. The topic is called Going from Weakness to Victory, Not Weakness to Wickedness. So if you're available, please RSVP to Vishal Prabhu, and then please attend. It'll be a wonderful session. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.